Hello and welcome to Crafting in Pathfinder 2nd Edition Remastered Part 2. In the previous video we discussed the process of crafting most common items, and in this one we're going to take it a step further and talk about special situations like crafting magic items and forging weapons and armor from precious materials. The rules for transferring and upgrading runes will be addressed in a future video that's all about runes. Also note that this video is for the remastered edition of Pathfinder. If your game is using the original Legacy 2nd Edition rules, please see the link in the description for my series that covers those rules. And one last quick disclaimer, the examples used in this video all assume you have a formula for the item being crafted. So if you're crafting by making a copy of an item instead of using a formula, simply add one extra day of setup, meaning it will take 2 days of work before you roll your skill check. See the previous video in this series if you need more information on how and why that is. Crafting magic items works exactly like crafting everything else, but there are a few points that you will want to pay special attention to. First, although an item's stat block might include different types of that item, in most cases, each type of a given item will have its own formula. For example, the stat block for an animal staff includes 3 different types: regular, greater, and major. You cannot use the formula for a greater animal staff to craft a major animal staff. Those are considered to be 2 wholly separate items, each using their own formula. However, there is one key exception to this, which is any item where the key difference between types is item level. For example, the stat block for Spacious Pouch shows 4 different types, and the key difference between them is item level. Therefore, the same formula can be used to craft any of the 4 different types of Spacious Pouches. But note that this only applies to items where item level is the main difference between types, and each type of the item is the same rarity. For example, having the formula to craft one type of Aeon Stone cannot be used to craft other types of Aeon Stones because each type of Aeon Stone is wildly different from the others. When in doubt, the GM will decide if the formula you have can be used for other types of the same item. Second, pay attention to the craft requirements section in the item's description. This area will show you anything extra needed beyond the norm. In the previous video, you learned that there are 6 requirements that must be met before you can start crafting. We are essentially adding a 7th requirement here, which is simply do whatever is listed under the craft requirements heading. Often these requirements are going to say something to the effect of supply a casting of a specific spell at a given rank. This means that during the first day of crafting, someone must cast the specified spell at the required rank in order for that item to be crafted. So, for example, if you're crafting a major animal staff, then someone will need to cast Runic Body and Summon Animal at first rank, and then cast Animal Messenger, Speak with Animals, and Summon Animal again all at 2nd rank, and then cast Animal Form and Summon Animal again both at 3rd rank, and Summon Animal yet again at 4th rank, and finally Animal Form, Moon Frenzy, and Summon Animal all at 5th rank. You would not need to cast Know the Way as part of the crafting process because that is a cantrip, and cantrips are not listed rank spells. When casting spells to meet a crafting requirement, remember these key points. First, the person who is doing the crafting does not need to be the one casting the spell. There's no requirement for them beyond having the magical crafting feat. Therefore, anyone can be the one who actually casts the spell. If you're making a fireball scroll, you do not need to know how to cast the fireball spell yourself, but instead can have a friend cast the spell for you as part of the crafting process. Second, note that the rules specify that a spell slot must be used when casting the spell to craft a scroll or a wand. In other words, you can't use a charge from a scroll or a wand to cast the spell that's needed to craft another scroll or a wand. The energy of the spell must come from a person in the form of a spell slot. Third, there are no other effects when casting the spell. When you cast a fireball spell for the purpose of creating a fireball scroll, you're not going to blow up your house. Instead, the energy of the spell is safely transferred to the item and there are no other effects. And last, when casting a spell as part of a crafting requirement, you will likely need to pay any associated costs with casting that spell, except if you are making a staff or a wand. So, for example, if you're crafting a rank 2 lock scroll, it says here that there is a cost of 6 gold worth of precious materials in order to cast lock at 2nd rank. If you're making a rank 2 lock scroll, then you must provide that cost in addition to the regular cost of crafting. But staves and wands are different. If you're making a rank 2 wand of lock, you do not provide any of the usual spell costs when casting the spell as part of the crafting process. Although I haven't seen it spelled out in the rules, I believe the key distinction here is that when someone uses a scroll, that scroll is consumed, and you don't need to provide spell costs at the time that the scroll is used. But with staves and wands, which are not consumables, you do need to provide the cost each time the spell is cast using the staff or wand, and therefore you don't also need to pay the spell cost up front when making the staff or wand. The bottom line here is that you should only be paying the cost for the spell once per actual use of the spell. And while we're on the topic of spells and magic items, it may be worth mentioning that magic scrolls and wands cannot be used to cast cantrips, focus spells, or rituals. They can only be crafted to cast regular spells. You cannot create a wand to cast your favorite focus spell or make a scroll to cast a ritual. And also, don't make assumptions about when you need to have a spell cast as part of crafting. If it doesn't say that you need to, then you don't. The skeleton key, for example, casts the breach spell when it's used, but does not require a breach spell to be cast when crafting a skeleton key. Likewise, people sometimes assume that potions that cast spells when you drink them require those spells to be cast when you're making and brewing those potions, but it is incredibly rare for that to actually be the case. Invisibility potions, for example, do not require anyone to cast the invisibility spell when brewing them. In fact, the person who is crafting the invisibility potion doesn't even need to know how to cast that spell or have the ability to cast spells. All the information needed to brew that potion is entirely included in its formula. Beyond these few tweaks, crafting items, regardless of if they are wands, scrolls, potions, wondrous items, or whatever, they all work exactly as was outlined in the previous video. You need to provide 50% of the cost of the materials up front and spend 1 day working with the formula, at the end of which you make a crafting skill check. If successful, you can either choose to pay off the remaining balance or spend another day working to lower that balance. And since potions and scrolls are consumable items, they can be made in batches of 4. In addition to magic items, we also want to discuss forging weapons and items with uncommon materials. The items we discussed in our Crafting Part 1 video assume that you are using mundane materials like wood or iron. But in the world of Pathfinder, there are many more exotic materials that can be used when crafting, such as silver or adamantine. Crafting weapons or armor with special materials is pretty simple. It works just like regular crafting, but there are a few special points that we need to discuss. As usual, you must provide materials equal to 50% of the item's price up front. But if you're making something with precious materials, you can't just pay the cost of that out of your pocket in gold coins. Instead, you have to somehow source the precious material that's needed as well. For example, you want to craft a cold iron warhammer. When we look up the stats for cold iron weapons, we see a few things worth noting. First, precious materials are categorized as being low grade, standard grade, or high grade, each with their own stats, like how magic items are listed with varying types. If you're curious what the difference is between the grades of a material, Each grade dictates the highest level item that may be crafted from it, as well as the highest level of rune that may be etched upon it. Low grade materials can be used to craft items up to 8th level and hold runes up to 8th level. Standard grade materials can be used to craft items and hold runes up to 15th level, and high grade materials can be used to craft items and hold runes of any level. Material grades will also affect the hardness, hit points, and break thresholds of the item made from them. We also see it has an item level. Warhammers are level 0, but when crafting from precious materials, you must meet or exceed the level of the base item or the material, whichever is higher. So you would need to be at least 2nd level to craft a low grade cold iron warhammer and 10th level to make a standard grade hammer. But the big difference comes when we look at price. Here, price is based on the bulk of the item that we are making. In this case, a warhammer is 1 bulk, so a low grade cold iron warhammer has a price of 40 gold plus 4 per bulk, making the price of this hammer 44 gold pieces. This is the same price for any weapon that is only 1 bulk. You do not add the cost of a normal warhammer to this. Also note that you always need to pay for at least 1 bulk, so if the item that you are crafting is light bulk, then you treat it as being 1 bulk for the purpose of calculating its price. When we start crafting, we must provide materials equal to 50% of the price up front, just like always. In this case, that would be 22 gold worth of materials. Next, we look at the craft requirements line in the description. Here it says that of those 22 gold coins, 22 silver pieces of that must be in cold iron. All of this special material is needed up front. We do not provide 11 silver worth of cold iron now, and another 11 silver worth of it later. So before we can start crafting, we need 198 silver pieces worth of regular general materials, and specifically 22 silver pieces worth of cold iron. This is all of the cold iron that we will need for this project. After 1 day of work and a skill check, we have the option, as usual, of paying the remaining balance of 11 gold to complete it, but none of that needs to be in cold iron. It can be paid as usual with 11 gold pieces. We now have a cold iron warhammer crafted with low grade cold iron, and we can etch runes upon it up to 8th level. We will need to upgrade to a standard grade cold iron warhammer if we want to use runes that are 9th level or higher. Crafting armor from precious materials works the same way, except you need to adjust its bulk. The armor table shows the bulk for each suit of armor, assuming that you are wearing it. But when crafting, you use the armor's carried bulk, which is 1 more than a suit of armor's worn bulk. To calculate this, you simply add 1 to the bulk that you see listed in the table. If you are crafting adamantine chainmail, you would calculate its price using 3 bulk instead of 2. In this video, we discussed a few more advanced applications of crafting, namely crafting magic items and forging weapons and armor from precious materials. As a reminder, we will be discussing how to craft, etch, and transfer runes in a future video that's dedicated specifically to the topic of runes. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and as always, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who supports me in this channel by liking the videos, leaving comments, and subscribing to the channel or Patreon. With that, thanks for watching, take care, and happy gaming!